The mechanic's daughter heard gunshots and saw a man stumble through her garage door, bleeding, desperate, hunted. She could have called the police. Instead, she hid the Mafia boss under a pile of greasy blankets. What she didn't know, he was running from his own family. And saving his life would cost her everything she had left. The wrench slipped from Lena's oil-stained fingers and clattered against the concrete floor. She cursed under her breath, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The garage was sweltering even at midnight, the broken air conditioner just another thing on her endless list of repairs she couldn't afford. She was 23 years old and drowning in her dead father's debts. The 1987 Chevy pickup looming above her on the lift had been sitting there for 3 days. Mrs. Henderson needed it back by morning, and Lena still hadn't figured out why the transmission kept grinding. Her father would have known in 5 minutes. But her father had been dead for 2 years, and the garage was hers now, along with everything that came with it. She reached for the wrench again, when the first gunshot cracked through the night. Lena froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she listened. The sound had come from somewhere close, maybe 2 blocks away, in the direction of the old warehouse district. She held her breath, counting the seconds. Then came the screeching of tires, angry and desperate, getting closer. More gunshots. Pop, pop, pop. Rapid fire, like firecrackers on the 4th of July, except this was November in Detroit, and nobody was celebrating anything. Lena scrambled out from under the truck and ran to hit the button for the garage door. The ancient motor groaned to life, and the metal door began its slow descent. Too slow. Way too slow. The engine roar grew louder. Through the closing gap, she saw headlights swing into the alley behind her garage. One car, then another, then a third. Black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind that meant serious money or serious trouble. Usually both. The first vehicle fishtailed around the corner and disappeared down the alley. The other 2 followed, their taillights painting the brick walls red before vanishing into the darkness. The garage door finally clinked shut. Lena exhaled and pressed her palm against the cool metal, feeling her pulse throb in her temples. This neighborhood had always been rough, but lately it was getting worse. Last month, someone had dumped a body 3 streets over. The month before that, her friend Maria's cousin got caught in crossfire outside the bodega and lost his leg. She turned back toward the truck, ready to lose herself in work again, when she heard it. A sound at the side door. Not a knock. More like someone falling against it. Lena grabbed the tire iron from her workbench and approached slowly. "We're closed," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The sound came again. A thud, then a groan, low and pained. Against every instinct screaming at her to leave it alone, to call the police, to pretend she'd heard nothing, Lena reached for the deadbolt. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. In this neighborhood, sometimes the only thing between a man and death is a locked door. Choose carefully which side you want to be on. She chose. The door swung open, and a man collapsed into her garage. He was tall, maybe 6'2", dressed in what had once been an expensive suit. Now the white shirt was torn and soaked with blood, the jacket hanging off one shoulder. His face was pale, slick with sweat, and twisted in agony. He clutched his left side where blood seeped between his fingers. "Please," he gasped, his eyes finding hers. They were dark, intelligent, filled with the kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly how bad things are. "They're coming." Lena's mind raced. She should slam the door. Should run. Should. The sound of engines returning shattered her paralysis. The SUVs were coming back. "Get up," she hissed, dropping the tire iron and grabbing his arm. He was heavy, all muscle despite the blood loss, and he grunted as she hauled him toward the far corner of the garage. "Can you move?" Trying, he managed, stumbling forward. The pile of tarps and old blankets sat exactly where her father had always kept them, a greasy, forgotten heap in the darkest corner, next to the oil drums and boxes of spare parts nobody wanted. She kicked them aside with her boot, revealing just enough floor space for a man to lie flat.
"Get under," she ordered.
"Don't make a sound. Don't move. Don't even breathe loud." He looked at her for one long second, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of gratitude. Then he lowered himself to the ground with a barely suppressed groan and stretched out on the cold concrete. Lena threw the tarps and blankets over him, piling them haphazardly until he disappeared completely beneath the grimy mound. A dark stain was already spreading on the concrete where he'd lain, and she quickly dragged an empty oil drum over it. The engines were right outside now. She ran to the workbench, grabbed a rag, and wiped her hands frantically. Her mind spun through a dozen stories, a dozen lies, trying to find one that might actually work. The blood on her hands wasn't coming off completely. She grabbed another rag, poured solvent on it, scrubbed harder.
Car doors slammed.
Multiple pairs of feet hit the pavement. Someone pounded on the garage door with enough force to rattle the frame. "Open up." Lena took one breath.
2.
She smoothed down her tank top, tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, and forced her face into an expression of annoyed confusion. Then she walked to the door and yanked it open. 3 men stood in the alley, all wearing dark clothes and darker expressions. The one in front was massive, with a shaved head and a neck thick as a tree trunk. The other 2 flanked him, hands inside their jackets in a way that made their intentions crystal clear. "Help you," Lena said, letting irritation creep into her voice. Like they'd interrupted her work. Like she dealt with midnight visitors all the time. The big man looked her up and down. "You see anybody come through here? Last couple minutes." "See anybody?" Lena scoffed. "I've been under a truck for the past 3 hours. Haven't seen anything except transmission fluid." She held up her stained hands as evidence. "Mind if we take a look inside?" But he was already moving forward, not really asking. Lena stepped aside. Fighting them would only make her look guilty. "Knock yourself out. Just don't touch anything. I've got equipment worth more than my life in here." They filed past her, and she watched as they spread out through the garage. One of them kicked at the pile of blankets. Her heart stopped. But the kick was casual, dismissive, just a cursory check that sent up a small cloud of dust. The big man walked a slow circle, his eyes scanning every corner. He paused at the workbench, picked up her father's old photo in its cracked frame. "This your old man?" "Was," Lena said shortly. "He's dead." "Sorry to hear that." He didn't sound sorry. He set the photo down and continued his inspection, finally stopping in front of her. Too close. Invading her space in a way meant to intimidate. "You're sure you didn't see anyone?" Man in a suit, bleeding, moving fast. Lena held his gaze, even though her knees felt like water. "Mister, if someone bleeding showed up here, I'd have called 911. I run a garage, not an emergency room." He studied her face for what felt like an eternity. She could feel her pulse pounding in her neck, wondered if he could see it, if the tremor in her hands was visible. She curled her fingers into fists and kept staring right back at him. Finally, he nodded. "All right. You see him, you call this number." He pulled a card from his pocket and pressed it into her palm. "There's money in it for you. Good money." "Sure," Lena said, glancing at the blank white card with just a phone number printed on it. "No name. No business. Nothing. I'll keep an eye out." They left without another word, piling back into their SUVs. The engines roared to life, and the vehicles peeled out of the alley, heading toward the main street. Lena stood in the doorway until the sound faded completely. Then she stood there another full minute, making sure they weren't coming back. Her legs were shaking so badly she had to lean against the doorframe. When she finally found the strength to move, she walked to the pile of blankets and pulled them back. The man lay exactly as she'd left him, his eyes open, watching her. His face was even paler now, his breathing shallow. "They're gone," she whispered. He tried to sit up and failed, collapsing back with a grunt of pain. Fresh blood darkened his shirt. Lena knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his wound, not sure where to even begin. You need a hospital. No hospitals, his voice was firm despite the pain. They'll find me there. You'll die without one. Maybe his eyes met hers again, and this time she saw something beyond the fear and pain. Resignation, perhaps. Or determination. But I'll definitely die in one. At least this way, there's a chance. Lena sat back on her heels, looking at this bleeding stranger who'd stumbled into her life and turned it upside down in the span of 5 minutes. She thought about the men who'd just left, about the card with its anonymous number, about the black SUVs and the casual violence they represented. She thought about her father, who died for reasons nobody would ever fully explain to her, who'd kept secrets that had cost him everything. And then she thought about all the bodies she'd seen in this neighborhood over the years. All the times she'd heard gunshots and sirens and screams in the night. All the times she'd looked away, kept her head down, minded her own business. Sometimes the only thing between a man and death is a locked door. "What's your name?" she asked. "Adrian," he managed a weak smile. "And you just saved my life." Lena stood up and walked to her father's old medical kit, the one he'd kept for the inevitable cuts and burns that came with garage work. She pulled out bandages, antiseptic, and the needle and thread she'd used once to stitch up her own hand. "Don't thank me yet," she said, returning to kneel beside him. "We've got to stop the bleeding first. And then you're going to tell me exactly what kind of trouble just followed you into my garage." Adrian's blood had soaked through 3 towels by the time Lena managed to cut away his shirt. The wound was a clean through and through, just above his hip. A bullet had entered from the front and exited out the back. She'd seen enough hunting accidents in her father's garage to know that was both good and bad news. Good because nothing was lodged inside. Bad because she had 2 holes to worry about instead of 1. "This is going to hurt," she warned, pouring antiseptic onto a clean rag. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Just do it." She pressed the rag against the wound, and his entire body went rigid. A strangled sound escaped his throat, but he didn't scream. His hand shot out and gripped the leg of her workbench hard enough to make the whole thing shake. "You've been shot before," Lena observed, working quickly to clean the area. "Once or twice," his voice came out strained. "Occupational hazard." "What occupation involves getting shot at midnight in Detroit?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "The kind I'm trying to leave behind." Lena threaded the needle, her hands surprisingly steady now that the immediate danger had passed. Growing up in this garage had taught her to stay calm under pressure. When your transmission lift fails and 1,000 pounds of steel is swinging over your head, panic gets you killed. Fear was something you felt later, after the crisis was over. She started stitching. Adrian's breathing turned ragged, but he kept silent, watching her work with a strange intensity. When she finished the front and moved to help him roll onto his side for the exit wound, he studied her face. "Why did you hide me?" he asked quietly. "You don't know me. For all you know, I deserved what they were trying to do." Lena paused, the needle hovering above the second wound. It was a fair question. She'd asked herself the same thing in the moments after those men had left. "Maybe you did deserve it," she said, beginning the second set of stitches. "But I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I've seen enough men die in that alley outside. Seen the police come and take statements and do exactly nothing about it. Seen families get torn apart because someone was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they wore the wrong colors, or they owed money to the wrong people." She tied off the stitch and reached for fresh bandages. "My father used to say that every person gets to make one choice that defines them. One moment where they decide what kind of human being they're going to be. Maybe this is mine." "Noble," Adrian murmured. "Stupid, but noble." "Yeah, well, stupidity runs in my family." She pressed the bandage firmly against his back, making him wince. "My dad worked himself to death trying to keep this garage running. Died of a heart attack, right there by that workbench. 52 years old, and he spent every day of his adult life covered in grease and breathing in fumes. People told him he was stupid too." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry about your father." "Don't be." He died doing what he loved. Lena helped him roll onto his back again and started wrapping the bandage around his torso, which is more than most people can say. She was securing the final piece of tape when headlights swept across the garage door's high windows. They both froze. A car engine idled outside. Then came the sound of a door opening, boots hitting pavement, and a flashlight beam dancing across the door's small window. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the garage.
Detroit police.
Anyone in there? Lena's eyes met Adrian's. His hand moved toward his jacket, where she could now see the outline of a gun tucked into his waistband. "Don't," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare." She stood up, wiping her bloody hands on a fresh rag, and walked to the door. Her mind raced through possibilities. The men in the SUVs could have called the police. Or maybe someone heard the gunshots and reported them. Either way, lying to gangsters was one thing. Lying to police was something else entirely. She cracked the door open 6 inches. 2 officers stood there, one older with gray at his temples, one younger and keen-eyed. The older one held a flashlight. "Evening, officers," Lena said, letting her exhaustion show. "It wasn't hard. Something wrong." "Got a report of gunfire in this area," the older cop said. His badge read Martinez. "You hear anything unusual tonight?" "I heard something about 20 minutes ago," Lena said truthfully. "Sounded like it came from over by the warehouses. Scared the hell out of me, to be honest." "You been here all night?" the younger officer asked, trying to peer past her into the garage. "Since 6 p.m. I've got a transmission job that's killing me." She gestured back toward the truck on the lift. "Customer needs it tomorrow morning, and I still can't figure out what's wrong with it." Martinez swept his flashlight beam across the visible portion of the garage. "Mind if we take a quick look inside? Just want to make sure you're safe." Lena's heart hammered, but she stepped back. "Sure, but don't touch anything. Liability issues." They came in, and she watched their flashlight beams trace across her workspace. The younger officer walked toward the back corner where Adrian lay hidden behind the Chevy's bulk and the shadows. Lena held her breath. But he only glanced around briefly before returning to his partner. "Looks clear," he said. "Though you really shouldn't be working alone this late at night, miss. It's not safe." "Can't afford to hire help," Lena said with a shrug. "Bills don't pay themselves." Martinez handed her a card, a real business card this time, with the police department logo. "You see or hear anything else, you give us a call. There's been increased gang activity in this area lately. Lot of new players moving in, fighting over territory." "I'll keep my head down," Lena promised. He was sitting up now, his face pale but his eyes alert. "You're a hell of a liar," he said. "Yeah, well," Lena dropped onto an overturned crate, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult." "In my world, it's a compliment. A valuable skill," he shifted, testing the bandages. "Thank you. Again. Don't make me regret it," Lena said. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Despite the blood and pain, there was something refined about him. The way he held himself, the way he spoke. This wasn't some street thug. Those men were professionals. "And you're not exactly some random guy in the wrong place at the wrong time, are you?" Adrian met her gaze steadily.
"No."
"I'm not. So who are you really? And why did they want you dead badly enough to chase you through half of Detroit?" He was silent for a long moment, and Lena could see him weighing his options, deciding how much truth to give her. Finally, he said, "The less you know, the safer you'll be." "I'm already involved," Lena countered. "I already lied to armed men and police officers for you. I think I deserve to know what I'm risking my life for." Adrian studied her face, and something shifted in his expression, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "My name is Adrian Moretti," he said quietly, "and until about 6 hours ago, I was supposed to be a dead man." Dawn broke gray and cold over Detroit, painting the garage windows with weak November light. Lena hadn't slept. She'd spent the night perched on her work stool, watching Adrian drift in and out of consciousness while the city slowly came back to life outside. She'd learned exactly 3 things about him. His last name was Moretti, Someone very badly wanted him dead, and he was surprisingly good at evading direct questions. Every time she tried to press for details, who were those men? What had he done? Why was he being hunted? He deflected with either a pained grimace or a change of subject. By 3 a.m., she'd given up trying. Now he was awake, his color slightly better, watching her heat water on the ancient hot plate she kept for instant coffee. "You should go to a hospital," Lena said, not for the first time. "I should do a lot of things," Adrian shifted, testing his wounded side. "A hospital isn't one of them. Then you should at least go somewhere else. Those men could come back." "They won't." "Not right away," he said it with such certainty that Lena turned to look at him. "They'll assume I kept running. They'll be checking the bus station, the train depot, maybe the airport. The last place they'll look is the place they've already searched." "You sound like you know a lot about how they think." "I do." He accepted the mug of coffee she handed him, wrapping both hands around it like he was trying to absorb its warmth. "I used to think like them." Before Lena could pursue that statement, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and swore softly. "Problem?" Adrian asked. "Mrs. Henderson." The truck. Lena looked up at the Chevy still sitting on the lift, its transmission still a mystery. "She's coming at 8 to pick it up, and I still haven't fixed it." "What's wrong with it?" "If I knew that, it would already be fixed." She set down her coffee and grabbed her tool belt. "The transmission grinds when shifting from second to third, but I've checked everything: fluid levels, clutch assembly, synchronizers. Nothing's obviously wrong." Adrian carefully stood up, one hand pressed against his bandaged side. "Let me look." "You're shot. Sit down."
I'm bored.
"And I'm not useless," he walked, more like shuffled, over to the truck. "Besides, I owe you. The least I can do is help with the transmission." "You know about cars?" "I know about a lot of things." He studied the truck for a moment, then gestured toward the control panel. "Drop it down. Let me hear it run." Against her better judgment, Lena lowered the lift. Adrian slid, very carefully, into the driver's seat and started the engine. He ran through the gears, and even she could hear the grinding on the second to third shift. He turned off the engine and climbed back out, moving stiffly. "It's not the transmission. I've been working on cars since I was 12. I think I know." "It's the motor mount," Adrian interrupted. "Driver's side. It's cracked, letting the engine torque just enough on hard shifts to throw the linkage out of alignment. The transmission's fine. It's just getting bad information." Lena stared at him. Then she dropped to her knees and looked where he'd indicated. Sure enough, there it was, a hairline crack in the motor mount, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "How did you?" She stood up, brushing off her knees. "That would have taken me another 6 hours to find." Adrian shrugged, then winced at the motion. "My father owned a garage. Before he moved into other businesses. I spent my childhood covered in grease, just like you." "Your father owned a garage," Lena repeated slowly. "What kind of other businesses?" "The kind that makes people want to shoot you in alleys." He limped back toward the crate he'd been using as a chair. "You have a replacement mount." She did, tucked in the parts inventory her father had maintained with obsessive precision. Within an hour, she'd swapped out the damaged mount. The truck shifted smoothly now, the grinding completely gone. Mrs. Henderson arrived right at 8, paid in cash, and drove away happy. Lena watched her go, then turned to find Adrian examining the photos on her workbench. Her father's photos, him standing in front of the garage on opening day, him holding a young Lena on his shoulders, him bent over an engine with that expression of total concentration she remembered so well. "He looked like a good man," Adrian said quietly. "He was the best man." Lena's voice came out rougher than she intended. "Worked himself to death, keeping this place running. Everyone told him to sell, to get out of this neighborhood, but he said he had a responsibility to the people here. That they needed a place where they could get honest work done, at honest prices." Adrian picked up the photo from opening day, studying it closely. Too closely. "What?"
Lena asked.
"What happened to him? You said heart attack, but what?" Adrian set the photo down carefully. "What exactly did he do before he opened this garage?" He was a mechanic. Worked for different shops around the city. Lena's unease grew. Why? This photo. The jumpsuit he's wearing. Adrian pointed to the logo on her father's chest, barely visible in the old picture. That's a Moretti family uniform. From their fleet maintenance division. Lena felt the floor tilt slightly. Your family? My father ran legitimate businesses and illegitimate ones. The garage service was legitimate. But people who worked there sometimes got pulled into the other side. Adrian's voice went quiet. Some refused. Those who refused too loudly. Sometimes they had accidents. My father had a heart attack, Lena said firmly, but her hands had started shaking. The doctor said, I'm not saying he didn't. Adrian looked at her with something that might have been sympathy or might have been guilt. I'm just saying your father knew people I knew. Worked in places my family controlled. And now you've saved the life of the one person in that family who's trying to get out. A car door slammed outside. Both of them tensed, but it was just the mail carrier making her rounds. Lena sat down heavily on her work stool. So you're what? Mafia? Is that what businessman means in your world? Adrian corrected. I'm trying very hard to make it past tense. And those men last night? People who'd prefer I stay in the family business. Permanently, he met her eyes. I have information they'd rather I didn't share with certain federal authorities. They wanted to resolve that problem before I could become 1 inch. Jesus, Lena put her head in her hands. I'm hiding a mob informant in my garage. I prefer reformed criminal trying not to die.
Despite everything, Lena almost laughed.
She looked up at this stranger, this Adrian Moretti who'd crashed into her life 12 hours ago and turned it inside out. He was watching her with those dark, intelligent eyes, waiting to see if she'd throw him out now that she knew the truth. Don't bleed on the oil drums, she said finally. What? If you're going to stay here until you can move without tearing your stitches, fine. But don't bleed on my oil drums. They're expensive to replace. She stood up and grabbed her coffee. And if anyone asks, you're my cousin from Ann Arbor. Your name is? I don't know, something normal. Not Moretti. Adrian Grant, he offered.
Fine.
Adrian Grant, my cousin, helping out at the garage while I catch up on work, she pointed at him. And you stay out of sight when customers come. Last thing I need is someone recognizing Detroit's most wanted mechanic. I'm not wanted. Not officially. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. That's the whole problem. They want to kill me before I become officially wanted by the authorities. Wonderful. Much better. A police cruiser rolled past slowly, and Lena watched it through the window until it disappeared. When she turned back, Adrian was looking at her father's photos again, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said quietly, for not throwing me out. Thank me by actually staying out of sight, Lena replied. And maybe by fixing anything else that breaks around here. I've got a feeling it's going to be a long week. By afternoon, Adrian had proven himself surprisingly useful for a man with a bullet hole in his side. He'd reorganized her parts inventory, fixed the temperamental overhead light that had been flickering for months, and somehow managed to restore the ancient radio to life. Now it crackled softly in the corner, playing old Motown classics while Lena worked on a brake job. She'd given him one of her father's old work shirts to replace his blood-soaked dress shirt. It hung loose on his frame, faded blue cotton with Mike, embroidered over the pocket in red thread. Seeing someone else where it created a strange ache in her chest. Your father's name was Mike? Adrian asked, following her gaze. Michael Torres. Everyone called him Mike. Lena returned her attention to the brake calipers. He hated that shirt. Said the embroidery made him look like a gas station attendant from the 50s. But customers loved it. Made him seem more trustworthy, I guess. Adrian ran his fingers over the embroidered name. How long ago did he die? 2 years, 3 months, 11 days. The specificity came out automatically. Lena had stopped counting weeks ago, but the numbers were still burned into her brain. Found him right there by the workbench. He'd been doing an oil change on the Patterson's minivan.
Just
collapsed.
I'm sorry.
Everyone's sorry. Lena's wrench slipped, and she barely caught herself from skinning her knuckles. Sorry doesn't pay the property taxes or the utility bills or the loan sharks he borrowed from to keep this place open. She had meant to say that last part. The words escaped before she could stop them, and now they hung in the air between them like an admission of weakness. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Loan sharks. Forget it. Not your problem. But he was already standing, walking slowly around the garage with that careful, analytical gaze she was starting to recognize. He stopped at her father's workbench, examining the photos more closely. Picked up the old toolbox, studied the scratches and dents that came from decades of use. Then he froze. What? Lena asked, watching him. Adrian's hand hovered over something inside the toolbox. When he pulled it out, Lena saw it was a keychain, an old brass one she'd seen 1,000 times before. Her father had used it for the keys to his truck. But Adrian was staring at it like he'd seen a ghost. Where did your father get this? His voice had gone very quiet. I don't know. He always had it. Why? Adrian turned the keychain over in his palm, and that's when Lena saw what had captured his attention. Engraved in the brass, worn but still visible, was an ornate crest, a stylized M, surrounded by laurel leaves. This is the Moretti family seal, Adrian said. We don't just hand these out. These are given to people who work directly for the family. People we trust. Lena set down her wrench and crossed to where he stood. My father was a mechanic. He fixed cars. For the Moretti family, Adrian's jaw was tight. This particular seal. I recognize it. My father gave these to his inner circle. The people who ran the legitimate businesses but knew about the illegitimate ones. The ones who were supposed to keep their mouths shut. The garage suddenly felt very cold. My father wasn't a criminal, Lena said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was remembering things now. Strange phone calls late at night. The way her father would sometimes come home with more cash than a day's work should have earned. His insistence that she never tell anyone who his clients were. I'm not saying he was. Adrian set the keychain down gently, like it might explode. But I am saying he knew things. Saw things. And people who know things about my family. They either stay loyal or they don't stay alive. He died of a heart attack, Lena insisted. The doctors. The doctors saw what they were paid to see. Adrian looked at her, and his expression was tortured. Lena, heart attacks can be induced. Drugs that don't show up in standard autopsies. It's not common, but it happens when someone becomes a liability. Lena's legs felt weak. She grabbed the edge of the workbench to steady herself. You think your family killed my father? I think it's possible. He ran a hand through his hair, wincing as the motion pulled at his stitches. I think maybe your father tried to get out. Or maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. Or maybe he just refused to do something they needed done. And in my family, refusal isn't really an option. Jesus Christ, Lena's vision blurred. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to push back the tears. He was just trying to make an honest living. The problem with my family is that we make it very hard for anyone to stay honest. Adrian's voice was bitter. We corrupt everything we touch. We offer money when people are desperate, protection when they're scared, opportunity when they're hopeless. And then we own them. Lena looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes. Is that what happened to you? They owned you. I was born into it. I didn't have a choice. He touched the keychain again, then pushed it away like it was burning him. I spent 28 years doing things I'm not proud of. Building an empire on fear and blood money. And then one day, I realized I'd become exactly what my father was. A monster in an expensive suit, convincing myself that the legitimate businesses somehow made up for all the illegal ones. So, you decided to talk to the feds. I decided to stop pretending. Adrian leaned against the workbench, suddenly looking exhausted. The FBI approached me 6 months ago. They had evidence, needed someone on the inside to confirm it. I said yes. And then last night, someone in the bureau leaked that information to my Uncle Vincent. The men in the SUVs. Vincent's enforcers. They were supposed to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Instead, I made it to your garage. He looked around the small space, at the tools, the photos, the oil-stained concrete floor. Your father's garage. The man my family probably killed for refusing to play along. And now here I am, bringing the same danger to his daughter. Lena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She wanted to scream at him, to throw him out, to pretend the last 18 hours had never happened. But she kept seeing her father's face in that photo, kept remembering all the little things that had never quite added up about his death. The closed casket funeral, even though he'd supposedly died of natural causes. The way the life insurance company had refused to pay out, claiming some technicality. The men in expensive suits who'd shown up at the funeral and stood at the back, watching. He knew, she said quietly. Didn't he? My father knew he was in danger. Adrian's silence was answer enough. Lena walked to the window and stared out at the alley where Adrian had collapsed last night, where her father had probably seen terrible things over the years, where men like the ones hunting Adrian had driven past 1,000 times, doing business that destroyed lives. You know what the worst part is, she said. I spent 2 years being angry at him. Angry that he'd worked himself to death and left me with nothing but debts and this falling apart garage. Angry that he'd been too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to sell out when he had the chance. She turned back to face Adrian. And now you're telling me he died because he tried to do the right thing. Yes, Adrian said simply. I think that's exactly why he died. And what about you? Lena's voice sharpened. Are you going to die trying to do the right thing too? Is that why you're here, bleeding in my garage? Probably. His smile was sad. Seems to run in the family. 3 days passed in uneasy routine. Adrian's wound was healing, slowly but healing. He'd stopped bleeding through the bandages, and the fever that had spiked on the second night finally broke. Lena changed his dressings twice a day and pretended not to notice the scars that covered his torso, old wounds that told stories she probably didn't want to hear. He made himself useful, fixed things, stayed out of sight when customers came, slept on a cot she'd set up in the small office that had once been her father's sanctuary. At night, she'd hear him pacing, talking quietly on a burner phone to people he never named. She didn't ask questions, didn't want to know more than she already did. On the 4th day, everything changed. Lena was finishing up a tune-up on a Honda Civic when a silver Mercedes pulled up outside. Not the kind of car she usually saw in this neighborhood. The kind that screamed money and didn't belong anywhere near her struggling garage. A man climbed out, tall, mid-50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. 2 other men emerged from the back seat, younger and broader, with the kind of build that suggested they spent serious time in the gym, or breaking things for a living. Adrian, who'd been organizing receipts in the office, appeared in the doorway. His face went pale. Get in the back, Lena hissed.
Now.
But it was too late. The man in the expensive suit was already at the garage door, knocking with the confidence of someone who expected to be let in. Lena wiped her hands and opened the door. Help you. Miss Torres. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. My name is Ralph Castor. I'm a developer working in this area. I was hoping we could have a conversation about your property. Not interested in selling. I haven't made an offer yet. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. May I come in? This won't take long. Every instinct told Lena to slam the door. But the 2 men behind Castor had positioned themselves in a way that made it clear refusing wasn't really an option. She stepped back, letting them enter. Castor's eyes swept across the garage with the cold efficiency of someone appraising merchandise. He pulled out a folder from his briefcase and set it on her workbench, right next to her father's photos. This neighborhood is changing, Miss Torres. New developments coming in. New businesses. Property values are about to skyrocket. He opened the folder, revealing architectural renderings of gleaming condos and trendy restaurants. Your garage sits on a prime corner lot. I'm prepared to offer you $300,000 for it. Lena laughed, a short, bitter sound. This property is worth at least twice that. Perhaps.
In a few years.
But right now, you're struggling to keep the lights on. I know you owe money. I know the bank is breathing down your neck. Castor's voice dropped to a tone that might have been sympathetic if his eyes weren't so cold. I'm offering you a way out. Take the money. Start fresh somewhere else. My father built this garage. I'm not selling. Your father is dead, Castor said it like he was commenting on the weather. And you're drowning in his debts. Be smart, Miss Torres. Take the offer. She said no. Adrian's voice cut across the garage. Castor turned, seeing him for the first time. His expression shifted, surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like recognition. And you are?
Castor asked.
Adrian Grant. Her cousin. Adrian moved forward, his limp barely noticeable now. The lady said she's not interested. I think that means this conversation is over. One of Castor's men stepped forward, but Castor held up a hand, stopping him. He studied Adrian with unsettling intensity. Grant, he repeated slowly. From Ann Arbor? That's right.
Funny.
You don't look like family. Castor's gaze flicked between Adrian and Lena. Different coloring. Different build. Different. Everything. Cousin on my mother's side, Lena said quickly. And you're right, this conversation is over. So, unless you want to pay me to fix your Mercedes, I suggest you leave. Castor was silent for a long moment. Then, he carefully gathered his papers and slid them back into his briefcase. But before he left, he pulled out a business card and set it on the workbench. Think about it, he said. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, the offer drops. Significantly, he paused at the door, looking back at Adrian. Oh, and Mr. Grant? Welcome to Detroit. I hope you find your stay comfortable. The way he said it made Lena's skin crawl. After they left, she turned to Adrian. Did he recognize you? I don't know, but Adrian's hand had drifted to where his gun was hidden under his shirt. Maybe. Or maybe he's just naturally suspicious. Lena walked to the window and watched the Mercedes pull away. $300,000. That would clear all my father's debts and leave enough to actually fix this place up. You're not seriously considering it? Of course not, she turned back to face him. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't tempting. Do you know what it's like, watching everything your father built slowly fall apart because you can't afford to maintain it? Working 18-hour days and still barely making rent. Adrian's expression softened. I know it's hard. That man, Lena interrupted. Castor. Something about him felt wrong. Beyond just the obvious intimidation tactics. I noticed, Adrian pulled out his burner phone. The way he looked at this property. That wasn't just a developer looking for a good investment. That was someone with a specific reason for wanting this exact location. What kind of reason? Adrian was already typing something into the phone. After a moment, he looked up, his face grim. This garage sits on the corner of 5th and Morrison, right?
Yes.
So this entire block used to be part of an old smuggling route. Back in the 20s and 30s during Prohibition, there were tunnels running under these buildings. They connected to the river, made it easy to move illegal alcohol inland. He showed her his phone screen, displaying an old map. Most of the tunnels were sealed up decades ago, but not all of them. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. You think Castor wants this property because of the tunnels? I think Castor wants this property because someone wants access to those tunnels. And I'd bet everything I own that the someone is my Uncle Vincent. Adrian pocketed his phone. The Moretti family has been trying to expand their smuggling operations for years. Drugs, weapons, people, whatever pays. A forgotten tunnel system would be worth millions to them. Jesus Christ, Lena sat down hard on her work stool. So, this isn't about development at all. Development is just the cover story. A way to legitimize clearing out the area and controlling the property. Adrian's jaw was tight. Castor is probably on Vincent's payroll. Or in his pocket. Same thing, really. And my father? Lena's voice went quiet. He would have known about the tunnels. If he worked for your family, he would have known, Adrian confirmed. And if he refused to give them access, or if he threatened to expose the operation. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lena stood up and walked to her father's workbench, picked up the keychain with the Moretti crest, and held it tight enough to feel the metal bite into her palm. They killed him for this, she said. For some goddamn tunnels under a garage. Probably. And now they want me gone too. Yes, Adrian moved to stand beside her. Which is why you should take the money and leave. Get out of Detroit. Start somewhere fresh where the Moretti family can't touch you. Lena looked at him. Is that what you do? Take the money and run? No, his smile was bitter. But I'm an idiot who's currently wanted dead by his own family. You still have a chance at a normal life. Normal, Lena laughed without humor. She set down the keychain and looked around the garage. At her father's tools, his photos, the concrete floor stained with decades of oil and sweat and hard work. My father died protecting this place. Died because he wouldn't let criminals use it for their business. And you want me to just hand it over to them? I want you to stay alive. Then help me fight back. Lena turned to face him fully. You said you have information on your family. Information the FBI wants. Does it include anything about Castor? About this development scheme? Adrian hesitated.
Some.
But Lena. Then use it. We expose Castor, expose whatever operation he's running for your family, and maybe, just maybe, I get to keep my father's garage and you get to stay alive long enough to testify. It's not that simple. These people don't just give up. They'll come back harder. Let them come. Lena's voice was steel. I'm done running. Done hiding. Done watching men in expensive suits destroy everything my father built. She picked up the keychain again and held it out to him. You said you wanted to stop pretending.
To do the right thing.
Well, here's your chance. Help me fight them. Adrian looked at the keychain, at her face, at the garage around them. She could see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find a way to talk her out of this. Finally, he took the keychain. All right, he said quietly. But we do this smart.
No héroes, no mártires.
We use information, not violence. We expose them without getting ourselves killed in the process.
Deal.
They shook hands, and Lena felt something shift between them. They weren't just a desperate criminal and the woman hiding him anymore. They were allies. Partners. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against the garage roof like a warning. The rain continued through the night, turning the alley behind the garage into a river of oil-slicked water. Lena sat in the office with Adrian, surrounded by papers he'd been hiding in a false bottom of his leather bag, documents, photographs, spreadsheets that chronicled years of Moretti family business. My uncle Vincent runs the smuggling operations, Adrian explained, spreading photos across her father's old desk. But he's smart. Everything goes through intermediaries. People like Castor, who can claim legitimate business interests if anyone starts asking questions. Lena studied a photograph of Castor shaking hands with a man who looked like an older, harder version of Adrian. That's your uncle? Vincent Moretti. My father's younger brother. Adrian's voice was flat. When my father died 5 years ago, Vincent took over the family business. Turned it from bad to worse. My father had rules: no drugs, no human trafficking, no killing unless absolutely necessary. Vincent has no such restrictions, and you worked for him. I was the legitimate face of the operation. Ran the real businesses, the restaurants, the construction company, the auto dealerships. Kept everything looking clean while Vincent ran drugs and guns through the same supply chains. Adrian pulled out another document, this one covered in numbers. I kept records of everything. Every shipment, every payoff, every dirty transaction. I told myself it was insurance, but really it was guilt. Proof that I knew exactly what I was part of. Lena flipped through the pages, her stomach turning. There were names she recognized, local politicians, police officers, business owners. People who were supposed to protect the community, all taking money from the Moretti family. Then she saw it. A ledger entry from 3 years ago. Michael Torres, $15,000. Maintenance services, 5th Street property. Contract terminated. Her hands started shaking. Lena. Adrian reached for the paper, but she pulled it back. Contract terminated, she read aloud. 3 years ago. 6 months before my father died. She looked up at him, her eyes burning. What does that mean? What's contract terminated? Adrian's face was pale. It means he stopped working for us. Refused further jobs. And then he died 6 months later, Lena's voice cracked. They gave him 6 months to reconsider, didn't they? 6 months to change his mind about giving them access to the tunnels. And when he didn't, she couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would make it real. Adrian took the paper from her gently and set it down. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what happened to your father. I ran the legitimate businesses. The other things, the enforcement, the threats, the cleanup, that was Vincent's domain. He kept me separate from it, said it was for my own protection. Protection, Lena repeated bitterly. While people died. Yes, Adrian didn't try to defend himself. While people died, I sat in my office downtown and pretended my hands were clean. I told myself I was different, better. But I took the money, lived in the house that blood bought, drove the cars, wore the suits, played the part of the respectable businessman while my uncle buried bodies. Lena stood up and walked to the window, watching rain stream down the glass. My father's toolbox, she said quietly. I need to see it again. Adrian brought it over, setting it on the desk. Lena opened it slowly, looking at the tools her father had used every day, wrenches worn smooth by his hands, screwdrivers with tape-wrapped handles, the keychain with the Moretti crest. Then she found something she'd never noticed before. Hidden under the tool tray, in a small compartment she'd always assumed was empty, was an envelope. Old, yellowed with age, sealed with tape that had gone brittle. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter in her father's handwriting, dated 6 months before he died. Lena, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it.
I'm sorry, Mia.
I'm sorry for everything I'm about to tell you, and everything I can't. I worked for the Moretti family for 15 years. Started as a simple mechanic, fixing their cars. But they don't keep things simple. Eventually, I learned about the tunnels, about what they used them for. I kept quiet because I was afraid. Because we needed the money. Because I told myself it wasn't my business. But last month, they asked me to do something I couldn't live with. They wanted to use the garage as a distribution point. Drugs moving through every night, right under where you sleep in the apartment upstairs. I said no. I told them I was done. Vincent Moretti didn't take it well. He said I knew too much to just walk away. He gave me 6 months to reconsider, 6 months to watch you and think about what happens to families when fathers make the wrong choices. I'm not going to change my mind. And I'm not naive enough to think they'll let me live knowing what I know. So I'm writing this letter and hiding these keys. You'll find them taped under the middle drawer of my desk, because someone needs to know the truth. The tunnels run from the old warehouse on Morrison Street all the way to the garage. There's an entrance behind the false wall in the storage closet. Your grandfather built it during Prohibition, and I've kept it sealed for 20 years. Don't open it, Lena. Don't go down there. Just know that it exists, and know that bad men want it. I'm sorry I brought this danger to your door. I'm sorry I worked for these people. I'm sorry for every choice that led us here. Be better than me, Mija. Be braver than me. And if you get the chance, do what I couldn't stop them. I love you always, Dad. Lena's vision blurred with tears. She clutched the letter to her chest, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. Adrian stood beside her, not touching, just present. Lena. He knew, she choked out. He knew they were going to kill him, and he died anyway rather than let them use this place. Rather than put me in danger. He died protecting you, Adrian said quietly. That's what fathers do. Lena wiped her eyes and looked at him. The keys. He said there were keys. She moved to the desk and felt under the middle drawer. Sure enough, taped to the underside was a small ring with 3 old brass keys. The tunnels, Adrian breathed. He kept the keys to the tunnels. And Vincent wants them. Lena's grief was hardening into something else now. Something colder and sharper. That's why Castor came. That's why they're pushing so hard to get me out. They think the keys died with my father, but they need the property to access the tunnels anyway. If they knew you had the keys, they'd kill me tonight. Lena pocketed the keys and picked up the letter, folding it carefully. But they don't know. And we're going to use that. Adrian studied her face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my father left me evidence. Evidence of how to access the tunnels, which means evidence of what they're using them for. She met his eyes. You have financial records. I have the physical location. Together, we have enough to bury Vincent Moretti and everyone who works for him. It's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Lena's voice was steel now, all traces of tears gone. My father died to keep these tunnels out of their hands. I'm not going to let that be for nothing. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. But we need proof of what's in the tunnels. Documentation. Photos. Something concrete we can give to the FBI. Then we go down there. Lena. Tomorrow night, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. After dark. We go down, we document everything, and then we blow this whole operation wide open. She looked at the keys in her palm, then at Adrian. You said you wanted to stop pretending. You said you wanted to do the right thing. Well, here it is. This is how we make our fathers proud. Yours by stopping the family business, mine by finishing what he started. Adrian reached out and took one of the keys, turning it over in his fingers. The metal was old, tarnished, heavy with history and secrets. Tomorrow night, he agreed. We go into the tunnels. Outside, the rain fell harder, and somewhere in the darkness, the enemies were already moving. Morning brought weak sunlight and an unexpected calm. Lena opened the garage at 7, same as always, trying to pretend her world hadn't shifted on its axis overnight. Adrian stayed in the office, door cracked just enough to hear if trouble arrived. The day passed in strange normalcy. 3 customers came, an oil change, a battery replacement, a diagnostic on a check engine light. Lena worked with practiced efficiency while her mind churned over her father's letter, the tunnels, the keys burning a hole in her pocket. Around noon, she brought Adrian a sandwich from the bodega down the street. You didn't have to do that, he said, looking up from the laptop he'd been working on. You've been staring at spreadsheets for 5 hours. You need to eat. She set the sandwich on the desk. What are you looking at? Vincent's money trails. Trying to connect the dots between Castor's development company and the smuggling operation, he rubbed his eyes. It's all here, but it's buried under so many shell corporations and offshore accounts that proving it will take more than just my testimony. That's why we need what's in the tunnels. Lena pulled up a chair. Physical evidence. Something undeniable. If there's anything down there. For all we know, they haven't used those tunnels in years. Castor wouldn't be pushing this hard for an empty tunnel. She unwrapped her own sandwich. Besides, my father's letter was only 3 years old. They were actively trying to use the garage back then. I doubt they just gave up. Adrian took a bite of his sandwich and studied her. You're different today. Different how? Focused.
Determined, he paused.
Less afraid. Oh, I'm terrified, Lena admitted. But I'm also angry. And anger is more useful than fear. She looked at him directly. What about you? Having second thoughts about going down there? About 100. Adrian's smile was wry. But I'm still going. They ate in companionable silence for a moment. Then Lena said, How's your side?
Better.
Still hurts, but I can move without wanting to die. He set down his sandwich. You did good work with those stitches. Where'd you learn? YouTube, mostly. And necessity, Lena shrugged. You spend enough time in a garage, you learn basic first aid. Cuts, burns, the occasional nail through a hand. I stitched up my own leg once when I caught it on a piece of sheet metal. Resourceful. Poor, she corrected. Can't afford a hospital visit for every injury, so you figure it out. Adrian was quiet for a moment. After this is over, if we survive, you'll have money. The FBI pays for information like mine. They'll set me up in witness protection. Give me enough to start over. I'll make sure you get a share. I don't want your money. It's not my money. It's money I helped steal over the years. Money that should have gone to legitimate wages, honest work. He met her eyes. Your father deserves that much. You deserve that much. Before Lena could respond, a car backfired on the street outside. The sound was sharp, sudden, exactly like a gunshot. Adrian moved faster than she'd seen since he stumbled into her garage. His hand was inside his shirt, pulling the gun from his waistband, his body already pivoting toward the door in a crouch that spoke of training and instinct. "Adrian," Lena started. But he was already at the window, the gun held professionally in a two-handed grip, scanning the street with eyes that had gone cold and hard. This wasn't the man who'd been eating a sandwich 30 seconds ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. The car, an old Honda with a faulty exhaust, coughed again and drove away. Slowly, Adrian lowered the gun. But his hands were shaking now, and when he turned to face Lena, she saw something in his expression that looked like shame. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought." "You thought someone was shooting?" Lena stood up slowly, her heart still hammering. "It's okay." "It's not okay." He carefully engaged the gun's safety and tucked it back into his waistband. "That's the third time this week I've pulled a weapon on nothing."
I'm dumpy.
Paranoid. "One of these days I'm going to hurt someone who doesn't deserve it." Lena moved closer, studying his face. "How long have you been living like this? Looking over your shoulder, expecting bullets?" "Always," Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I grew up in a house with armed guards and bulletproof windows. Went to school with a driver who carried a gun. Had my first death threat at 16". He ran a hand through his hair. "This is my normal. This is what the family business does to you." "That's not normal," Lena said firmly. "That's trauma." "Probably." He sat down heavily in the chair. "My therapist said the same thing before I fired her. She wanted me to process my feelings about the violence. I told her I didn't have time for feelings when people were actively trying to kill me." Despite everything, Lena smiled. "You had a therapist?" Even mob bosses have anxiety. His own smile was self-deprecating. "Not that it helped. Hard to work through your issues when you're the source of other people's trauma." Lena pulled her chair closer and sat down. "Tell me something. Before all this, before you decided to turn informant, before the FBI, before running for your life, were you happy?" Adrian considered the question for a long moment. "I was comfortable. I had money, power, respect. I had a penthouse apartment with a view of the river and a garage full of cars I never drove." He looked at her. "But happy?"
No.
"I don't think I've been happy since I was a kid, back when I thought my father was just a businessman who owned restaurants." "When did you find out the truth?" 14. Walked into his office unannounced and saw him beating a man who'd skimmed from the till. Adrian's voice went flat. The man was begging, crying, saying he had a family. "My father broke his hands with a hammer. Told me after that this was the family business, and I'd better get used to it." Lena felt sick.
Jesus.
"I threw up in the hallway outside his office. Then I went to my room and didn't come out for 2 days." He stared at his hands. "My father came to see me eventually. Said he was sorry I had to see that, but that I needed to understand how the world worked. The strong survive. The weak get broken. And the Moretti family was strong." "That's not how the world works," Lena said. "That's how bullies justify being bullies." "I know that now. Took me 14 years to figure it out, but I know." Adrian looked up at her. "You want to know when I decided to talk to the FBI? It was 8 months ago. I was at a restaurant opening, one of ours completely legitimate. There was a waitress there, maybe 19, working her first shift. Pretty girl, nervous, trying so hard to do everything right." He paused, his jaw tight. "And I watched Vincent corner her in the back. Watched him touch her, threaten her, tell her she could keep her job if she was nice to him. And she was terrified, but she smiled anyway because she needed the money. Because refusing meant losing her livelihood, or worse." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "And I realized that girl could have been anyone.
Could have been you.
Could have been someone's daughter who just wanted an honest job and instead got trapped in our world." "What did you do?" Lena asked quietly. "I fired her, gave her severance pay, and told her to find work somewhere else." He laughed bitterly. "I thought I was being noble, saving her. But really I was just covering up what Vincent had done. Protecting the family, like I'd been taught." "But you went to the FBI." 3 days later. walked into their field office and said I wanted to talk. He met her eyes. I'm not a good man, Lena. I'm trying to do better, trying to make up for 28 years of looking the other way. But I've got a lot of blood on my hands. Lena reached out and took one of those hands. It was warm, calloused in unexpected places, trembling slightly. My father used to say that people aren't defined by their worst moments, she said. They're defined by what they do after. By whether they try to fix what they broke. She squeezed his hand. You're trying to fix it. That counts for something. Adrian looked at their joined hands, then at her face. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of hope. You're a better person than I deserve to know, he said quietly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just stupid enough to believe people can change. She let go of his hand and stood up.
Come on.
We've got work to do before tonight. What kind of work? Lena walked to the storage closet and pulled out 2 flashlights, checking their batteries. If we're going into those tunnels, we need to be prepared. That means supplies, a route plan, and a backup plan in case something goes wrong. You really are your father's daughter, Adrian said, but he was smiling now, a real smile that reached his eyes. Yeah, Lena agreed, testing the flashlight beam. I really am. Outside, clouds gathered again, promising another night of rain. But inside the garage, 2 people who should have been enemies worked side by side, planning to bring down an empire. And for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was doing exactly what her father would have wanted. The vandalism came at 2 a.m., announced by the sound of shattering glass. Lena bolted upright from where she'd been dozing on the office couch, her heart already racing. Adrian was on his feet before she was, gun in hand, moving toward the sound with practiced silence. Stay here, he whispered. Like hell. They moved together through the darkened garage. The security light she'd installed last year illuminated the scene through the broken front window. 2 figures in dark clothes, faces covered, spray painting the garage door with vicious red slashes. One of them saw her through the window and made an obscene gesture before both took off running. Should I? Adrian started, but Lena grabbed his arm. Let them go. They're just sending a message. By the time the police arrived 40 minutes later, called by a neighbor who'd heard the commotion, the vandals were long gone. The cops took a statement, wrote it down with obvious disinterest, and told Lena to call if anything else happened. She didn't mention Adrian, who'd hidden in the office with his gun still in hand. When they left, Lena stood in front of her garage and surveyed the damage. The spray paint read, "Last warning. Sell or else." Castor, she said flatly. Castor following Vincent's orders, Adrian emerged from the shadows. They're escalating, trying to scare you into taking the deal. Well, it's working. Lena's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets.
I'm terrified.
But I'm not selling. We should move up the timeline. Go into the tunnels tonight instead of waiting. It's already 3 a.m. We're exhausted, and you're still healing. Lena shook her head. We stick to the plan. Tomorrow night, like we agreed. We'll board up the window in the morning and... A car turned onto her street. Both of them tensed, but it was just someone driving home late. Except the car slowed as it passed the garage. Slowed enough for Lena to see the driver's face clearly in the streetlight. Ralph Castor, smiling. Son of a bitch, she breathed. He's watching. Making sure we got his message. Adrian's hand moved toward his gun, but Lena grabbed his wrist. Don't. That's what he wants. An excuse to call the cops and have us arrested, or worse. The car accelerated and disappeared around the corner. We need to repaint this before morning, Lena said, forcing her voice steady. Before customers see it. Last thing I need is people thinking the garage is some kind of gang territory. I'll help. They worked in tense silence, Adrian holding the flashlight while Lena used paint remover and a wire brush to scrub away the spray paint. It was slow, exhausting work, and her arms ached by the time they'd removed most of it. They'd have to repaint properly in the daylight, but at least the threatening message was gone. At one point, a car backfired 3 streets over. Adrian spun toward the sound, and this time the gun was out before Lena could stop him. He stood there in the darkness, weapon raised, scanning for threats that didn't exist. Adrian, she said gently, it's just a car. But he didn't lower the gun. His breathing had gone shallow, rapid. His hands were rock-steady on the weapon, but his eyes were wild. Adrian, louder now. Look at me. Slowly, his gaze shifted to her face. She took a careful step forward, hands visible, non-threatening. It's just a car, she repeated. No one's shooting. We're safe. I know, but he didn't sound like he knew. His voice was tight, controlled, through obvious effort. I know, Another car passed, and he flinched toward it, gun tracking the movement before he could stop himself. Lena moved forward and gently placed her hand over his on the gun. Let me have it.
Fine.
You're not fine. And that's okay. She kept her hand steady over his. But I need you to give me the gun before you hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon and let her take it. His hands were shaking now, and he looked at them like they belonged to someone else. This is who I am, he said quietly. This is what the family business made me.
Broken.
Paranoid. Dangerous. You're not broken. Lena engaged the safety on the gun and set it on the workbench. You're traumatized. There's a difference. Is there? Adrian's laugh was hollow. I spent 15 years training myself to react to threats with violence. 15 years learning that the first person to shoot is the one who survives. You can't just turn that off. Maybe not. But you can learn something new. Lena turned to face him fully. My father taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. You're scared, I get it. But you're still here. Still trying to do better. That takes more strength than pulling a trigger. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. How do you do that? Do what? See the best in people. Even people like me. Because I've seen the worst, Lena said simply. I've seen men who enjoy hurting others, who use fear as currency, who destroy lives without a second thought. You're not one of them. You're just someone who grew up in hell and is trying to find their way out. He reached up and touched her face, a gesture so gentle it made her breath catch. You saved my life. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Not just that night in the garage. Every day since his thumb traced her cheekbone. You gave me a reason to survive this. Something worth protecting. Lena's heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. Adrian. I need to tell you something. His voice was rough. Your father, Michael Torres. I found his file in Vincent's records. Found out exactly what happened to him. Everything in Lena went cold. What did you find? Vincent ordered it. Called it a heart attack special. That's what they call it when they use potassium chloride. Induces cardiac arrest. Looks natural if the coroner doesn't know what to look for. Adrian's jaw was tight. Your father refused to cooperate. Refused to give them access to the tunnels. So Vincent had him killed and made it look like natural causes. Lena couldn't breathe. She'd suspected, had known in her gut, but hearing it confirmed was different. Final. How long have you known? She whispered. Since the second day. I found his file when I was going through Vincent's records. Adrian's eyes were tortured. I should have told you immediately. But I was a coward. I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. And how am I looking at you? Like I'm guilty. Like I killed him myself. His voice cracked. And maybe I did. Maybe if I'd stood up to Vincent sooner, if I'd gone to the FBI years ago, your father would still be alive. Lena turned away, pressing her hands against the workbench. Her father. Murdered. Injected with poison and left to die on this garage floor while his killer walked away clean. Say something, Adrian pleaded. Yell at me. Hate me. Something. She turned back to face him, and her voice when it came was ice. Did you know beforehand? Did you know Vincent was going to kill my father?
No.
I swear to God, I didn't know until I found the file. But you knew what Vincent was capable of. You knew he'd killed people before. Yes, Adrian didn't flinch from the accusation. I knew, and you did nothing. I did nothing. He met her gaze steadily. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I ran the legitimate operations and Vincent handled the rest. I built a wall between his world and mine and pretended I couldn't hear the screams from the other side. Lena wanted to hit him, wanted to throw him out, wanted to scream that he was just as guilty as the man who'd ordered her father's death. But she looked at his face, at the guilt and shame and genuine anguish written there, and realized something. He already knew. He'd been punishing himself for years, carrying the weight of every life his family had destroyed. Turning informant wasn't redemption. It was penance. We go into those tunnels tomorrow, she said finally. We document everything. And then we make sure Vincent pays for what he did. To my father. To that waitress. To everyone. Lena. That's how you make this right, she continued, her voice hard. Not by apologizing. Not by feeling guilty. But by actually stopping them. By making sure no one else dies because they refuse to play along. Adrian nodded slowly. Tomorrow night, she agreed. And, Adrian, if you ever keep something from me like that again, you can face Vincent's men on your own. We're partners in this, which means complete honesty. Understood? Understood. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. Lena looked at the garage, her father's legacy, bought with his blood, and made a silent promise. I'm going to finish what you started, Dad. I'm going to stop them. Tomorrow night, they would descend into the darkness beneath the garage. Tomorrow night, everything would change. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Lena worked on routine repairs with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, while Adrian compiled evidence and prepared their equipment for the tunnel expedition. They barely spoke, the weight of last night's revelations hanging between them like smoke. By 6 p.m., Lena closed the garage and locked the doors. She stood in the center of the workspace, looking at her father's tools, his photos, the concrete floor where he'd died. I should hate you, she said suddenly. Adrian, who'd been checking the batteries in their flashlights, went still. You'd have every right to. I should throw you out. Call the police. Let Vincent's men find you, she turned to face him. My father died because of your family, because of the empire you helped build. Yes. And here you are, bleeding in his garage, using his daughter to hide from the consequences of your own choices. Yes, Adrian said again. He set down the flashlight and met her eyes. Everything you're saying is true. I don't have a defense. I don't deserve your help or your forgiveness. Lena crossed to where he stood. Then why am I helping you? I don't know. Because you don't owe me lies, she said, echoing her father's letter. You owe yourself a way out. And maybe if you get out, if you actually bring down Vincent and everyone like him, maybe my father's death means something. Maybe it wasn't completely in vain. Adrian's throat worked. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. I know, and she realized she did know. Could see it in every choice he'd made since stumbling into her garage. The way he'd stayed hidden to protect her, helped with repairs, compiled evidence instead of running. That's the only reason you're still here. She walked to the storage closet and pulled it open. Behind the old paint cans and boxes of rusted parts was a false wall, just like her father's letter had described. She pressed the hidden latch, and a section of drywall swung inward, revealing darkness beyond.
This is it, she said.
The entrance to the tunnels. Adrian joined her, shining his flashlight into the opening. A narrow stairway descended into blackness, the walls made of old brick that glistened with moisture. The air that drifted up was cold and smelled of earth and decay. Once we go down there, there's no going back, Adrian said. If Vincent finds out we've been in his tunnels, documenting his operation, he'll kill us both. I know. Lena pulled out her father's keys. But sitting here doing nothing while he destroys more lives? That's not an option. Not for me. Then we do this smart. Adrian pulled out a small digital camera. We take photos, we document everything we see, and we get out. No confrontations, no trying to be heroes. Just evidence gathering. Agreed. Lena inserted the first key into a lock she hadn't noticed on the tunnel door. It turned smoothly, well-oiled despite its age. Someone had been maintaining this entrance. They descended the stairs carefully, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The tunnel at the bottom was wider than Lena had expected, easily 6 feet across, with a curved ceiling high enough to walk upright. The walls were reinforced with timber beams that looked both ancient and recently repaired. "This is still active," Adrian murmured, running his hand along a beam. "These supports are new. Last few years at most." They moved deeper into the tunnel, and Lena's skin crawled with the sensation of being underground, of having tons of earth and concrete pressing down from above. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the confined space. After about 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Adrian's flashlight swept across the space, and they both froze. Boxes. Dozens of them, stacked against the walls, sealed with tape and marked with shipping codes.
Jesus, Lena Briatit.
Adrian moved to the nearest box and carefully cut the tape with a pocket knife. Inside were vacuum-sealed packages of white powder. He pulled one out, examining it in the flashlight beam. "Heroin," he said flatly. "At least 20 kilos in this box alone." Lena did quick math, looking at all the boxes. "That's got to be millions of dollars worth." "Try tens of millions." Adrian was already taking photos, documenting everything, the boxes, the markings, the chamber itself. "This is a distribution hub. They're moving product from the river through these tunnels and out to dealers across the city. And they wanted my garage to make it easier," Lena said, anger burning through her fear. "My father died, so they couldn't have a convenient loading dock for their poison. They moved through the chamber to another tunnel branch. This one led to what looked like a makeshift office, a desk, a computer, file cabinets. Adrian went straight for the computer, but it was password protected. "I can get around this," he said, pulling out a thumb drive. "I've got software that." Lena's voice was tight. "Look at this." She was standing in front of a corkboard covered with papers. Shipping schedules, payment ledgers, and photos. Photos of the garage. Of Lena working. Of her coming and going. Dated from the last 3 weeks. "They've been watching me," she said, her voice hollow. "Since before you even arrived. They were already planning to push me out." Adrian came to stand beside her, his face grim. "They've been preparing for months. Once they decided to take over this location, you became an obstacle." An obstacle to be removed. Lena ripped down one of the photos, herself walking to the bodega, unaware she was being surveilled. "Just like my father." "Not like your father," Adrian said firmly. "Because this time, we're fighting back." He photographed everything on the board, then inserted his thumb drive into the computer. The software began working, lines of code scrolling across the screen. "This will take a few minutes," he said. "Once I'm in, I can copy everything, client lists, distribution networks, payment records. Everything we need to take down the entire operation." A sound echoed through the tunnel behind them, distant but distinct. Footsteps. They both froze, listening. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices. "Told you we should check it weekly. Vincent's paranoid about."
"Relax.
"Nobody knows about this place except us." 2 men getting closer. Adrian yanked the thumb drive from the computer. "We need to go."
Now."
They ran back the way they'd come, but the voices were between them and the exit. Adrian pulled Lena into a side passage, pressing them both against the wall as 2 flashlight beams swept past their hiding spot. "Did you hear something?" one voice said. "Just rats. Place is full of them." The men moved toward the main chamber. Adrian gestured for Lena to follow him deeper into the side passage. They moved as quietly as possible, but every step seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. The passage curved and split. Adrian hesitated, clearly unsure which way led out. "Left," Lena whispered. "These tunnels follow the street grid. Left should take us back toward the garage." They went left, moving faster now. Behind them, shouts echoed. "Hey, someone's been in the computer." "Find them." They ran. The tunnel twisted and climbed, and Lena's lungs burned with the effort. Adrian was slowing, his hand pressed against his wounded side, but he kept pace. A beam of light hit the wall beside Lena's head. There. A gunshot cracked through the tunnel, deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet ricocheted off brick somewhere behind them. Go! Adrian shoved Lena forward as another shot rang out. They burst through a door. Not the entrance they'd used, but another exit, this one leading into the basement of the abandoned warehouse on Morrison Street. They scrambled up a set of stairs and out into the night air. Rain was falling again, cold and hard. They ran through the alley, not stopping until they were 3 blocks away, pressed against the wall of a shuttered store, gasping for breath. Did they see our faces? Lena panted. I don't know. Maybe not. Adrian was bent over, one hand still pressed to his side. When he pulled it away, it was wet with blood. I think I tore the stitches. We need to get you back to the garage. We need to get this evidence to the FBI. Adrian pulled out the camera and thumb drive, checking them. This is enough. Photos of the drugs, the surveillance on you, and whatever I managed to copy from the computer before they found us. But they know someone was there now. They'll move everything. Not tonight. Not in this rain. It'll take them hours to pack up that much product. Adrian straightened with obvious effort. We call my FBI contact now. Tonight. They can raid the tunnels before Vincent moves anything. Lena looked back toward the warehouse, toward the tunnels beneath her father's garage. And what about me? What about the garage? The garage becomes evidence in a federal case. They'll protect it. Protect you. Adrian met her eyes. This is it, Lena. This is how we finish what your father started. This is how we make Vincent pay. She thought about her father's letter. His keys. His choice to die rather than let them win. Make the call, she said. Adrian pulled out his burner phone and dialed. After 3 rings, someone answered. Agent Morrison? This is Adrian Moretti. I have something you need to see. Tonight. They waited in the garage, doors locked, lights off, watching the rain streak down the windows. Agent Morrison had promised to be there in 2 hours with a tactical team. 2 hours that felt like an eternity. Adrian was in the office, uploading everything to an encrypted server as backup. His side had stopped bleeding, but his face was drawn with pain. Lena had forced him to sit down, to let her check the damage. 3 stitches torn, she reported, examining the wound. Could be worse. Could be dead, Adrian said. Those bullets were close. Too close. Lena cleaned the wound and applied fresh bandages. When the FBI raids those tunnels, Vincent will know it was you. Know you gave them the evidence. That was always the endgame. I testify. I go into witness protection. I disappear. Adrian caught her hand. But you don't have to disappear. Once Vincent's arrested, once the case is public, you'll be safe. You can keep the garage. Rebuild your father's business. Alone, Lena said quietly. I'm sorry, his thumb traced circles on her palm. I wish things were different. I wish I'd met you in another life, another way. Somewhere I wasn't dragging you into danger. If you'd met me another way, you'd have been the enemy. Lena managed a small smile. At least this way, we're on the same side. Adrian pulled her closer, and she let herself lean against him, careful of his injuries. They sat like that for a long moment, 2 people who should have been strangers, bound together by violence and choice. Then Lena smelled it.
Gasoline.
She jerked upright. Do you smell? Glass shattered in the front office. A bottle arced through the broken window, trailing flame. Molotov cocktail. Move. Adrian was already pulling her toward the back as fire erupted across the office floor, racing along the trail of gasoline that had been poured through the window. Another bottle crashed through the side window. Then another. The garage was filling with smoke and flame, the fire spreading with terrifying speed across the oil-stained concrete. The truck. Lena screamed. Mrs. Henderson's old Chevy was still parked near the main door. We can use it too. No time. Adrian dragged her toward the storage closet, toward the tunnel entrance. But when they reached it, smoke was already pouring up from below. They're smoking us out, Adrian said grimly. They know we were in the tunnels. They're trying to trap us. Outside, Lena could hear engines. Multiple vehicles. Men shouting. They were surrounded.
The office window, she said.
It's small, but you'll fit. I won't. Adrian was already pushing her toward the back. You go.
Run.
Find the FBI. I'm not leaving you, Lena. I said I'm not leaving you. She grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and sprayed foam at the nearest flames. There has to be another way out. Adrian's eyes swept the garage, calculating. The main door was blocked by fire. The side door led to where the men were waiting. The tunnel was compromised. The windows were too small for him. Then his gaze landed on the overhead door, the one facing the alley.
The door mechanism, he said.
If we can trigger it manually, the button's by the main door. We'll never reach it through the fire. Not the button. The emergency release. Adrian was already moving, climbing onto a workbench despite his wounded side. The emergency release cord hung from the garage door track, 10 feet up and shrouded in smoke. He grabbed it and pulled. The door's lock mechanism disengaged with a metallic clunk. Now we just need to lift it, he said, jumping down and immediately doubling over in pain. Lena was already at the door, fingers digging under the bottom edge. Adrian joined her, and together they heaved upward. The door rose a foot. 2 feet. Enough. The truck, Lena said. We can push Mrs. Henderson's truck. Use it as a battering ram. They ran through the smoke to the Chevy. Lena threw it in neutral while Adrian positioned himself at the driver's door, ready to steer. Together, they pushed, and the old truck began to roll toward the partially open garage door. Just as they built momentum, the door behind them exploded inward. 3 men rushed in, Castor's thugs, expecting to find them trapped by the flames. Instead, they found a 2-ton pickup truck rolling toward them. Look out, one of them yelled. Adrian jumped into the driver's seat and yanked the wheel. The truck swung toward the garage door opening, picking up speed down the slight incline. Lena ran alongside and jumped into the passenger seat just as the truck hit the door. Metal shrieked. The door bent and gave way, and they were through, rolling into the alley. Behind them, the garage was an inferno. The men were scrambling back, away from the flames that were now spreading to the ceiling, to the walls, consuming everything her father had built. Adrian hit the brakes. Can you drive? Yes. They switched places, Lena sliding behind the wheel while Adrian pulled out his phone. The engine turned over on the first try, thank God for her repair work, and she threw it into drive. A black SUV swung into the alley entrance, blocking their path. Hold on, Lena said, and floored the accelerator. The old Chevy might have been beat up, but it was solid American steel. It hit the SUV's rear quarter panel like a linebacker, spinning the vehicle out of the way. They roared past and onto the street. Behind them, more SUVs were giving chase. Where's the FBI? Lena shouted over the engine noise. I'm calling them now. Adrian had the phone pressed to his ear. Morrison? We've got a situation. They're trying to kill us. Where he looked at the street signs. Heading north on 5th. 3 vehicles in pursuit. We need backup now. Lena took a hard right, tires screaming. The Chevy suspension wasn't made for this kind of driving, but it held. Behind them, the SUVs followed, closing the gap. A gunshot cracked. The rear window exploded, showering them with glass. Get down. Adrian returned fire through the broken window. 3 quick shots that made Lena's ears ring. One of the SUVs swerved, its tire blown out. It crashed into a parked car and stopped. 2 more SUVs kept coming. Another turn, heading toward downtown. Toward lights and people and hopefully safety. Lena's hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. There. Adrian pointed. The federal building. Morrison said he's sending cars from there. Lena could see it 4 blocks ahead, lit up like a beacon. And between them and safety, one of the SUVs was pulling alongside, trying to force them off the road. She jerked the wheel right, slamming the Chevy into the SUV's side. Metal crunched. The SUV veered away but came back harder, its driver determined. Then, up ahead, blue and red lights. Police cars, 3 of them, blocking the street in front of the federal building. Behind them, black sedans with FBI markings. "Come on," Lena whispered, pushing the old truck for everything it had. "Come on, come on." The SUVs saw the roadblock and broke off, peeling away down side streets. Lena didn't slow down until she was past the police cars and screeching to a stop in front of the federal building. Agents in tactical gear surrounded them immediately, weapons drawn. "Adrian Moretti," one of them called. "That's me." Adrian raised his hands slowly as he climbed out, blood soaking through his shirt. "And I've got everything you need to take down Vincent Moretti. Tonight." Agent Morrison himself appeared, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. He looked from Adrian to Lena to the beat-up truck. "Your timing is terrible," he said. "We were 30 minutes from rolling out. Now half the city saw you two fleeing what looks like a gang war." "They burned down her garage," Adrian said. "Tried to kill us both. If that's not enough to move now." "It's enough," Morrison gestured to his team. "Get them inside. Medical attention for both. And someone get me every piece of evidence they have." He looked back at the smoke rising in the distance, where Lena's garage was still burning. "We're ending this tonight." As agents led them inside, Lena looked back one last time at the smoke on the horizon. Her father's garage.
Her home.
Everything she had.
Gone.
But as Adrian's hand found hers in the chaos, as federal agents mobilized to finally bring down the Moretti empire, she realized something. Her father hadn't died protecting bricks and mortar. He'd died protecting a principle. The idea that some things, dignity, integrity, the right to say no to evil, were worth more than survival. And tonight, she'd honored that principle. Tonight, they'd both survived with their integrity intact. That was something no fire could burn away. The FBI raid happened at 4 a.m. Lena watched it on monitors in Agent Morrison's office. 30 agents moving through the tunnels, documenting everything, arresting the 2 guards they found protecting the drug cache. By sunrise, Vincent Moretti and Ralph Castor were both in custody, along with 8 others connected to the operation. It was over. Adrian sat beside her, his side freshly stitched by an FBI medic, watching his uncle being led away in handcuffs on the screen. His expression was unreadable. "You did the right thing," Morrison said, standing behind them. "The evidence you provided is rock solid. Vincent Moretti is going away for the rest of his life." "And the others?" Adrian asked. "The politicians on the payroll, the cops, the business owners who looked the other way. We'll get them." "This is just the beginning," Morrison set a folder on the desk. "Your part is done, Mr. Moretti. We'll need your testimony at trial, but for now, you're free to enter witness protection. We have a safe house ready, new identity prepared. You can leave today." Adrian nodded slowly. "What about Lena?" "Miss Torres is a material witness, but she's not in danger. With Vincent in custody and the operation shut down, there's no one left to threaten her." Morrison turned to Lena. "We've arranged for temporary housing while you figure out your next steps. The garage is a crime scene for now, but once we release it, the property is yours to do with as you wish." Lena couldn't imagine returning to that burned shell. Couldn't imagine rebuilding, starting over, pretending any of this had been normal. "I'd like to speak with Adrian alone," she said quietly. Morrison nodded and left, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the window, Detroit was waking up. Traffic beginning to move, lights coming on in buildings, people starting their ordinary days in an ordinary city that had no idea what had happened in the darkness beneath their streets. "So this is it," Lena said finally. "You disappear. New name, new life. They send you somewhere far away where the Moretti family can't find you. Arizona, probably. Or Montana. Somewhere I can see the sky." Adrian's smile was sad. "I've spent my whole life in cities, surrounded by concrete and crime. Maybe open spaces will be good for me. Maybe you'll rebuild the garage." Morrison said the FBI will help with funding. It's the least they can do after using it as a crime scene. You could expand, maybe hire some help. Turn it into something bigger than what your father had. Maybe Lena turned to look at him. Or maybe I'll sell the property and go back to school. Finish the engineering degree I started before my father died. Maybe I'll leave Detroit entirely. Adrian's expression flickered with something that might have been hope. You should. You should get out of this neighborhood, away from these memories. Start fresh. Is that what you're going to do? Start fresh. I'm going to try, he reached for her hand. I'm going to live in a small town where nobody knows the Moretti name. Get a normal job, maybe work in a garage, actually. Use my hands for something good. Maybe get a dog. I've always wanted a dog. Despite everything, Lena smiled. You don't seem like a dog person. I'm not sure what kind of person I seem like anymore. Adrian's thumb traced patterns on her palm. 5 days ago, I was a mob boss running from assassins. Now I'm just Adrian. No family, no empire, no identity. Just a man who's trying to figure out who he is when all the lies get stripped away. You're someone who chose to do the right thing, Lena said. Even when it cost you everything. That's who you are. He pulled her closer, and she let herself lean into him one last time. They sat like that as the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I wish I could stay, Adrian said quietly. I wish we'd met differently. I wish. Don't. Lena pulled back to look at him. Don't make this harder than it already is. We both know you have to go. We both know this is goodbye. Is it? His eyes searched her face. Morrison said you could leave Detroit. I'll be in witness protection, but that doesn't mean forever. Once Vincent is convicted, once the family is dismantled, I could. Could what? Come find me. Lena shook her head. Adrian, we barely know each other. 5 days in a garage, running for our lives, planning to take down your family, that's not real. That's not how people build a life together. It felt real to me. It felt like survival, but her voice cracked on the words, betraying her. We were thrown together by circumstances, by violence and fear and necessity. That's not the same as. As what? Adrian cupped her face in his hands. As love. You're right. 5 days isn't enough time to know if this is love. But it's enough time to know that you're the first person in 28 years who made me want to be better. Who saw the worst parts of me and still believed I could change. Lena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. And you're the first person since my father died who made me feel less alone. Who understood what it means to carry someone else's legacy, to live in the shadow of their choices. She took his hands from her face and held them. But that's not enough to build a future on. No, he agreed. It's not. They sat in silence, holding hands, watching the city wake up. Finally, Morrison knocked on the door. Mr. Moretti? The transport is ready. Adrian stood slowly, and Lena stood with him. He gathered the few belongings he had. The burner phone, the thumb drive with evidence, a change of clothes Morrison's team had provided. At the door, he turned back. The garage property. When they release it, there should be money from the FBI, and I'll make sure you get a share of whatever assets they seize from Vincent. It's not enough, but... I don't want your money, Lena said. It's not my money. It's money the family stole. Money that should have gone to people they hurt. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out something, the brass keychain with the Moretti crest, polished clean. Your father kept this. Kept it even after he left the family, even knowing what it represented. I think he kept it as a reminder. A reminder of what? That he'd made a choice. That he'd looked at corruption and violence and said no. That he'd been loyal to something bigger than fear. Adrian pressed the keychain into her palm. You did the same thing. You hid me when you could have turned me away. You stood up to Castor, went into those tunnels, risked everything to do what was right. Your father would be proud. Lena's vision blurred. How do you know? Because I'm proud. Adrian kissed her forehead gently. And I barely know you. Imagine how the man who raised you would feel. Morrison appeared in the doorway. We really need to go. Adrian stepped back, his hands falling away from hers. Goodbye, Lena Torres. Goodbye, Adrian Moretti. He walked out of the office, and Lena forced herself not to follow. Forced herself to stand there, holding the keychain tight enough to feel it bite into her palm, while the man who'd crashed into her life 5 days ago walked out of it forever. Through the window, she watched him get into a black sedan. Watched it pull away from the federal building and disappear into morning traffic.
Gone.
Morrison came back in, his expression sympathetic. We have a car ready to take you to the temporary housing. You should get some rest. You've been through hell. Yeah, Lena said. I should. But she didn't move. She stood at the window, looking out at the city where her father had lived and died, where she'd spent 23 years learning to survive in a world that didn't care about people like her. In her hand, the keychain felt warm. She turned it over, reading the words engraved on the back that she'd never noticed before. Loyalty isn't silence, it's action. Her father's words, his philosophy, his legacy. And suddenly, Lena knew what she had to do. She turned to Morrison. The garage property. When can I access it? We should have the scene cleared in a few weeks.
Why?
Because I'm going to rebuild it, Lena said. I'm going to rebuild my father's garage. And I'm going to name it Moretti Motors. Morrison looked surprised. After the family that killed him? After the man who helped me bring them down, Lena pocketed the keychain. My father died protecting that garage. Adrian risked his life to make sure Vincent paid for it. The least I can do is honor both of them.
That's
surprisingly generous. No, Lena said quietly, thinking of Adrian's face as he'd walked away. It's just remembering that loyalty isn't silence. It's action. She left the federal building as the sun climbed higher over Detroit. The city was damaged, scarred by decades of corruption and violence. But it was still standing.
So was she.
And standing, she'd learned, was sometimes the bravest thing you could do. 6 weeks later, the November wind carried the smell of fresh paint and possibility. Lena stood in front of her garage, her father's garage, and looked up at the new sign. The letters gleamed in the afternoon sun. Moretti Motors. It had taken 6 weeks of work. 6 weeks of cleaning out the fire damage, replacing burned walls, installing new equipment. 6 weeks of permit applications and insurance battles and nights when she'd sat on the floor of the construction site and cried from exhaustion. But it was done. The garage looked different now. Bigger. Brighter. The old oil-stained concrete had been sealed and painted. The ancient lift had been replaced with a modern hydraulic system. New tools hung on the walls, organized and gleaming. Her father would barely recognize it. But his photo still sat on the workbench in a new frame, and the keychain with the Moretti crest hung on the wall beside it, a reminder of everything they'd fought for. Lena heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Mrs. Henderson approaching, her face lit with a smile. It's beautiful, honey, the older woman said. Your daddy would be so proud. I hope so. Lena wiped her hands on her coveralls, new ones, with Lena Torres owner embroidered over the pocket. Thanks for being my first official customer. Again. Mrs. Henderson laughed. That old truck has been through hell and back. Least I could do is bring it to you for proper maintenance. She glanced at the sign. Moretti Motors. That's an interesting choice of name. It's a long story. Best stories usually are. Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. I'm just glad you're staying in the neighborhood. We need good people here. After she left, Lena went back to work. She had 3 more appointments that day. Word was spreading that the garage had reopened, that Michael Torres's daughter was carrying on his legacy. People were coming back, bringing their cars, their trust, their business. She was under the hood of a Honda Civic when the mail carrier arrived. Package for you, Lena, Maria called out. She'd been Lena's friend since grade school and had recently taken the postal route that included this street. Just leave it on the bench, Lena called back, her hands full of spark plugs. This one's marked personal and confidential. Looks important. Lena emerged from under the hood, wiping her hands. Maria handed her a padded envelope with no return address, just a postmark from Phoenix, Arizona. Her heart stopped. You okay? Maria asked. You look like you've seen a ghost.
I've fine.
Just give me a minute. After Maria left, Lena sat on her work stool and stared at the envelope. Phoenix, where the FBI had sent Adrian, according to the news reports she'd read obsessively for the first 3 weeks. After that, she'd forced herself to stop looking, to move on. But here was evidence that he was alive, safe, thinking of her. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a silk handkerchief, expensive, the kind that probably cost more than her new coveralls. Wrapped inside the handkerchief was her father's old keychain, the one she'd given to Adrian. Except now it had been professionally restored, the Moretti crest polished until it gleamed, the brass looking almost new. And a note, written in Adrian's precise handwriting. Lena, I've been in Phoenix for 6 weeks now. I work at a garage, a real one, not a front for anything illegal. Just cars and honest work and grease under my fingernails. I have a small apartment with a view of the mountains. I adopted a dog. Her name is Hope, and she's a terrible guard dog but excellent company. I testified last week. 3 days of questions, of revealing every secret the Moretti family ever kept. Vincent will spend the rest of his life in prison. So will Castor and 16 others. The empire is finished. I'm free now. Truly free for the first time in my life. No family business, no obligations to the past, no one trying to kill me. Just Adrian Grant, mechanic, living a quiet life in Arizona. I thought freedom would feel better than this. Lighter, maybe. But mostly it just feels empty. I know what you said. I know 5 days isn't enough to build a future on. But I've spent 6 weeks trying to forget you, and I can't. I can't forget the woman who hid a stranger under greasy blankets, who stitched my wounds and challenged me to be better, who stood in a burning garage and refused to give up. You covered me once with a blanket. You saved my life. And I want you to know, I'll cover you for life. Whatever you need, wherever you are, you call, and I'll be there. No questions, no conditions. That's my promise. The keychain belonged to your father. It belongs with you in the garage he built and you rebuilt. But I had it restored first. Cleaned of all the tarnish, all the corruption it represented. I like to think that's what we both did, took something damaged and made it clean again. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me again. Maybe 5 days wasn't enough for you. Maybe you've already moved on, rebuilt your life without the weight of my history dragging you down. I'd understand that. I'd respect it. But if you ever find yourself in Arizona, if you ever want to meet a mechanic who's learning to be a better man, who has a terrible dog and a view of mountains he's still learning to appreciate, you know where to find me. The garage looks beautiful, by the way. I saw photos online. Moretti Motors. You have no idea what that means to me. What it means that you took a name associated with so much darkness and turned it into something good. That's what you do, Lena Torres. You take broken things and make them whole. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible. Thank you for being the person you are. With gratitude and something that feels dangerously close to hope, Adrian. P.S. The handkerchief was my mother's. She died when I was young, before my father fully corrupted the family business. She was a good woman who loved beautiful things. I think she'd be happy knowing it went to someone who reminds me that beauty still exists in this world. Lena read the letter 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. Then she walked to her father's photo and stood there for a long moment, the keychain warm in her palm. What do I do, Dad? She whispered. But she already knew the answer. She'd known it the moment she'd opened the envelope. Loyalty isn't silence, it's action. Her father had acted when it mattered, had stood up to the Moretti family and paid with his life. Adrian had acted too, had turned informant, had helped her bring down Vincent, had chosen redemption over running. Now it was her turn to act. Lena hung the restored keychain on the wall, right next to her father's photo. Then she walked to the office and pulled out her phone. It took 20 minutes of searching, but she found it, a small garage in Phoenix called Desert Auto Repair. The website showed a modest building with a few bays, a staff photo with for people, and reasonable prices. One of the mechanics in the photo had dark eyes she'd recognize anywhere. She saved the address. Not to use today or tomorrow or even next month,
But to have.
to hold on to. Because maybe Adrian was right. Maybe 5 days wasn't enough to build a future on. But it was enough to build a beginning. Lena returned to work, the letter tucked in her pocket like a secret. As she bent over the Honda's engine, she found herself smiling. The garage smelled like fresh paint and motor oil and possibility. Her father's legacy was secure. The Moretti empire was destroyed. And somewhere in Arizona, a man with a terrible dog and a view of mountains was learning to be free. Maybe someday she'd visit. Maybe someday they'd discover if what started in violence and fear could grow into something real. Something lasting. Or maybe not. Maybe this was enough. Knowing he was safe. Knowing she'd helped save him. Knowing that they'd both chosen to be better than the circumstances that brought them together. Outside, the sun was setting over Detroit. The same city where her father had died. The same streets where corruption had flourished for decades. But the Moretti family's grip was broken now, their tunnels sealed, their empire reduced to evidence in federal lockup. And in a small garage on 5th Street, a young woman worked late into the evening, building something her father would be proud of. As darkness fell, Lena looked at the keychain one last time before turning off the lights. The crest gleamed in the shadows, no longer a symbol of corruption but of redemption, of second chances, of the possibility that even the darkest legacies could be transformed into light. "You covered me once with a blanket," Adrian had written. "I'll cover you for life." Lena locked the garage door and headed home, her father's words echoing in her mind. Loyalty isn't silence. It's action. And tomorrow, she'd act again. She'd keep building, keep fighting, keep honoring the memory of a man who died standing up for what was right. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough.
The end.